Good evening, everyone. Well, it's evening for me. I'm in a different time zone than many of you today, but I wanted to talk to you about something that Justin Trudeau has really failed on. I've already talked about this in one video last week, and that's having leadership on the issue of the Americans proposing tariffs on our steel industry. So Justin Trudeau came out, and his big response to the steel tariffs, this is his big response to it, was to go and take a photo op at a steel plant. Now, I want to say this, I think it's very important for all Canadians to unite behind our manufacturers, especially of steel. They produce a lot of jobs and they're important to our economy. But it takes more than a photo op to make industries more competitive. And I want to suggest two ways to Justin Trudeau that he could easily help the steel industry, no photo ops required. The first is to use his constitutional powers to ensure that the Trans Mountain Pipeline is built out. This is, of course, many of you are following this debate. We've talked about it here. This has already passed rigorous environmental standards and rigorous environmental review at both the federal and provincial levels. This is something that has been in the works for many years. This isn't something that's just happened overnight, and the federal government has already signed off on this, but Justin Trudeau has basically allowed British Columbia and Alberta to have to enter into a trade war in order to see this built. So here's a stat that might be of interest to you. There was a news article a few months ago that said that 75% of the pipe from the steel that would be used to build out the Trans Mountain Pipeline would come from a steel factory in Regina, and that is the equivalent of 250,000 tons of pipe. So I think there would be a lot of jobs and a lot of impact on the steelmaking industry if those pipes were built out. And of course, this goes beyond the Trans Mountain Pipeline. You could talk about other projects that Justin Trudeau has essentially let die because he has so significantly changed the regulatory environment in Canada, making it so unstable and unpredictable that major corporations that would be investing capital into these job-creating projects would just say, look, it's too much risk. So Justin, rather than going to a steelmaking factory and just taking a photo op, why don't you build some pipelines? Point number two, you know what Justin Trudeau could do is he could pick up the phone and call his friend, who is the Premier of Ontario, his very good friend, and ask her why she has increased one of the main input costs of production of virtually any manufactured good in Ontario, and that is electricity. Why she has increased it so much to the point that there's actually a group that's been formed. It's called the Concerned Manufacturers of Ontario, who are saying, look, we're not competitive with counterparts in the United States because we're actually subject to higher electricity rates, which, as an aside, it kind of is weird to me given that we sell electricity to the United States. But hey, so you know, if Justin Trudeau really wanted to take leadership and give Canadian steel manufacturers a competitive advantage, he could aggressively and very firmly suggest to Ontario that their current policies, which have driven up electricity costs so high, should perhaps be altered. And I'm sure that this is something that will be discussed in the upcoming Ontario provincial election. So to all the Ontario folks who are listening tonight, make sure that that's something that you pay attention to. And there's so many other things that I could spend time talking to you about the changes that Trudeau's made to our taxation structure in Canada that has made it more difficult for businesses to create jobs. The carbon tax that they're putting in place, how that's going to make manufacturing less competitive, especially when we look to the US in terms of them trying to reduce taxes and reduce the regulatory burden to see their economy grow. And this, of course, is outside of the fact that the carbon tax likely won't reduce greenhouse gas emissions at all. In fact, the Liberals are going into spin mode, and they're changing their talking points on the carbon tax. Instead of saying that it's going to reduce greenhouse gas emissions, they're just using the term price on pollution without really defining what that means. So if you are concerned about climate change, the carbon tax actually doesn't reduce greenhouse gas emissions. It probably won't. And it also makes our manufacturing industries, which of course steelmaking is included in, less competitive. So to Justin Trudeau, it's all well and good that you want to go and have your picture taken, but what the people in that factory really need is you to show some political leadership and sound economic policy with regard to seeing major projects that would use steel, such as a pipeline being built out, instead of sitting on the fence and hoping it will just go away so that you don't have to make a leadership decision instead of going on vacation. And you could also ensure that our electricity rates are competitive, helping manufacturers as well as families. And you could also ensure that we have a competitive tax environment and regulatory environment writ large. But that takes leadership, that takes smart, and that takes something more than just failing to do your job. So I hope that you will change your tune, Justin Trudeau. Not hopeful, but if you don't, I'm sure the Canadian public will hold you to account for that. Working hard for you. Have a great evening.